The school bus rattled along the uneven road, kicking up dust as it made its way toward the remote countryside. Excitement buzzed through the group of high school students as they chatted, laughed, and made plans for their weekend adventure. Their teacher, Mr. Carter, stood at the front, reminding them of the educational purpose of this trip. "This castle has a long history, full of secrets," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Pay attention, and you might just learn something." The students barely listened. For them, this trip was about escaping school, exploring the supposedly haunted castle, and making memories. Among the group, Jake sat near the window, watching the dense forest rush by. He had always been a skeptic, but something about this trip unsettled him. Next to him, his friend Ethan flipped through a book on medieval architecture, muttering historical facts under his breath. "Come on, Ethan. We're here to have fun, not study," Mia, the class president, teased from across the aisle. Emily, the cheerful optimist of the group, leaned in. "Yeah. Let's talk about the important stuff, like who's brave enough to explore the castle at night." The challenge sparked excited whispers, but before anyone could answer, the bus came to a sudden stop. A hush fell over the students as they peered out the windows. They had arrived. The castle loomed ahead, a massive structure of stone and shadow, its weathered towers piercing the cloudy sky. It stood alone, surrounded by dense woods that stretched endlessly in every direction. The only road in was the one they had come from. As they unloaded, the wind carried an eerie silence. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an unnatural stillness. Jake nudged Ethan. "Tell me that doesn't feel wrong." Ethan adjusted his glasses, hesitating. "Maybe it's just peaceful." Their teacher clapped his hands. "All right, everyone. Inside we go." The castle's heavy wooden doors creaked as they were pushed open. The inside was cold and dim, the air thick with dust and the scent of old stone. Mr. Carter led them through the grand hall, his voice echoing as he spoke about the castle's history. It was once a fortress, later used as a hospital during the war. Some say, it holds secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. His words sent a shiver down Mia's spine. She laughed nervously. "You really know how to set the mood, Mr. Carter." The students were led to their sleeping quarters, boys on one side of the castle, girls on the other. The long corridors and towering ceilings made the place feel endless. As they settled in, a loud thump echoed through the halls. "What was that?" Emily whispered. "Probably just the old pipes," said Lucas, a senior who always pretended to be fearless. Dinner was served in the castle's dining hall. The students gathered around the long wooden table, candles flickering as they ate. Laughter and conversation filled the air, pushing aside the unease that had settled earlier. Then, Daniel, one of the quieter students, suddenly dropped his fork. His face was pale, and he swayed in his seat. "Hey, Daniel, you okay?" Mia asked. He tried to speak, but only a weak groan escaped his lips before he collapsed onto the table. Panic erupted. Mr. Carter and another teacher, Ms. Dawson, rushed to his side. His forehead burned with fever, and his breathing was shallow. "We need to get him to a hospital," Mr. Carter said, glancing at the teachers. "But the nearest town is miles away," Ms. Dawson replied. "And there's no cell signal out here." As they debated what to do, the lights flickered. A low, guttural sound came from Daniel's throat. Slowly, he lifted his head, his eyes glazed and unfocused. Then, in a flash, he lunged at the nearest student, teeth sinking into their arm. Screams filled the room as the student fell back, clutching their wound. Chaos erupted as chairs were knocked over, people scrambling to get away. Daniel's body convulsed before he collapsed again. But then, the bitten student, Jessica, began trembling violently. Her breathing turned ragged, her body twisting unnaturally. Within seconds, she rose to her feet, eyes hollow, mouth twitching. Then she lunged. The nightmare had begun. Screams echoed through the castle's dining hall as Jessica lunged at the nearest student, her movements jerky and unnatural. She tackled Lucas to the ground, snapping her teeth inches from his face. He shoved her off, scrambling backward, his face pale with terror. "Somebody help her!" Mia shouted, but deep down, she knew this wasn't normal. Jessica wasn't having a seizure, she was attacking people. Mr. Carter and Ms. Dawson rushed forward, trying to restrain her, but Jessica's strength was inhuman. She thrashed violently, growling like a rabid animal. Her eyes, once full of life, were now vacant and filled with hunger. "Something is wrong with her," Emily whimpered, clinging to Ethan's arm. Then, a gurgling sound made them turn. Daniel, who had collapsed moments ago, was rising to his feet. His movements were stiff, unnatural. His head tilted to the side, as though listening to something none of them could hear. Then, in a blur of motion, he lunged at Ms. Dawson, biting deep into her shoulder. A fresh wave of screams erupted. Ms. Dawson's cry of pain was cut short as she stumbled back, blood gushing from the wound. Her face twisted in agony, and then, she too began convulsing. "Run!" Mr. Carter shouted, grabbing the nearest chair and smashing it against Daniel, knocking him back. "Everyone, get out of here now!" The students bolted from the dining hall, their feet pounding against the stone floors as they sprinted through the dimly lit corridors. The terrified group split in different directions, panic overriding any logical thought. Jake, Mia, Emily, Ethan, Lucas, and a few others ran up a grand staircase, their breath ragged. Behind them, the sounds of snarling and scuffling grew louder as more bodies hit the ground. More students were getting bitten. They reached a long hallway lined with old, wooden doors. Jake grabbed the nearest handle and yanked it open. "In here!" The group rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind them. Jake and Lucas pushed a heavy bookshelf against it just as something crashed into the other side, clawing and snarling. "What the hell is happening?" Emily gasped, pressing her hands against her ears as if trying to block out the horror. Mia paced, her hands shaking. This isn't possible. People don't just turn into monsters." Ethan, who had been silent, muttered, "They do, in zombie movies." The room fell into silence. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "You're saying this is some kind of, what? A virus?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't know. But I saw something in the library earlier, old records about this place. It wasn't just a castle. It was a research facility during the war. They were experimenting on people here." Mia shot him a glare. "And you're just bringing this up now?" I didn't think it mattered." Ethan stammered. "I thought it was just history." A loud bang shook the door, making everyone jump. Whatever was outside was still trying to get in. "We can't stay here," Lucas said. "If more of them are out there, we're trapped." Jake peered out the room's only window. The castle grounds stretched below, the trees looking like dark shadows in the moonlight. The main gate was too far, and even if they got to it, the bus was useless. Mr. Carter had the keys, and who knew if he was even alive? "We need weapons," he said finally. "Something to defend ourselves." Mia clenched her fists. "And where exactly do we find weapons in a freaking castle?" Ethan hesitated. "There's an old armory." Everyone turned to him. "How do you know that?" Lucas asked. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I read it in the records. There should be old weapons stored in a lower chamber, if they're still there." Jake exhaled sharply. "It's our best shot." Emily wiped her eyes. "We'll have to go back out there, won't we?" Silence. Then Jake nodded. "Yeah. We move quietly, stick together, and make our way to the armory. If we stay here, we're dead." Another loud bang on the door. The clock was ticking. The heavy bookshelf trembled as something slammed against the door again. The students held their breath, their hearts pounding in unison. The snarls and scraping outside made it clear, the creatures weren't giving up anytime soon. "We have to move," Jake whispered, gripping the rusted metal candlestick he had found in the room. "If we stay here, we're dead." Ethan adjusted his glasses, his voice trembling. "The armory should be beneath the castle." but we'll have to go through the main hall. Mia's face twisted in frustration. Where all those things are? A tense silence settled over the group. There was no easy way out. Lucas checked the window again, but the drop was too far. We can't go out this way. Jake took a deep breath and nodded. Then we go back out. Stick together. No screaming, no running unless we have to. Emily wiped away a tear and forced herself to nod. Okay, let's go. A dangerous escape. Jake carefully moved the bookshelf aside, and Lucas slowly turned the doorknob. As the door creaked open, the hallway stretched before them, dimly lit, eerie, and too quiet. The dining hall, where the chaos had erupted, was just down the corridor. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows, making every object look like a lurking threat. Then, a groan echoed down the hall. Jake peered around the corner and immediately pulled back, his face pale. They're still there. Through the cracked door, the students could see the dining hall, now a blood-stained battlefield. Bodies lay motionless on the floor, some missing chunks of flesh. The long table was overturned, and chairs were scattered across the room. And then there were them. 4 students, no longer human, stood in the middle of the hall. Their heads twitched unnaturally, their jaws slack, blood dripping from their mouths. They weren't moving much, just standing there, almost as if they were listening. Mia covered her mouth to keep from making a sound. We can sneak past, Ethan whispered. If we stay quiet. Jake nodded and signaled for the others to follow. One by one, they crept along the side of the hall, keeping low. The candlelight flickered against the walls as they moved. Emily held her breath as she stepped past one of the fallen bodies. A faint gurgling sound made her freeze. Her eyes darted downward. One of the bitten teachers, Ms. Dawson, was still alive. Her body convulsed slightly, her fingers twitching. Her eyes, half-lidded, locked onto Emily's. For a split second, it seemed like she was still human. But then, with an unnatural jerk, her hand snapped up, grabbing Emily's ankle. Emily let out a strangled yelp before slapping a hand over her mouth. The others spun around, eyes wide with terror. One of the zombies turned its head sharply, groaning. Move, Jake whispered urgently. The group picked up the pace, hurrying toward the far exit. The groaning grew louder. One of the creatures let out a chilling snarl and stumbled forward. Then another. The first one sprinted. Jake shoved the door open, and they tumbled inside just as the undead rushed at them. The hidden passage. Slam. Lucas and Jake pressed their backs against the door, holding it shut. The creatures pounded on the other side, snarling with hunger. We can't stay here. Mia cried, looking around. The room was small, filled with old furniture and broken bookshelves. Ethan frantically searched the walls. There should be a passage. I read about it in the castle records. You better find it fast, Lucas gritted out, his muscles straining against the door. Ethan ran his hands along the wall, his fingers searching for something, anything. Then, his fingers caught the edge of a stone that felt different from the rest. Click. A portion of the wall shifted slightly. Dust rained down as an ancient door creaked open, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel. Got it. Jake didn't hesitate. Go. Now. One by one, they squeezed through the passage, their breaths shallow. As soon as Lucas slipped inside, the wooden door burst open behind them, the creatures spilling into the room. Mia yanked the secret door shut just in time. The pounding against it started immediately. A dark revelation. The tunnel was cold and damp, the air thick with the smell of old stone. The only light came from Ethan's phone flashlight, casting eerie shadows along the walls. This must be how people move through the castle in secret, Ethan murmured, his voice echoing. They followed the tunnel in silence, their footsteps hesitant. Finally, they reached another wooden door at the end. Jake pressed his ear against it. Silence. With a deep breath, he pushed it open. The group stepped into a massive underground chamber. Torches lined the walls, their flames flickering. The room was filled with old crates, rusted weapons, and, strangely, medical equipment. "What the hell is this?" Lucas muttered. Ethan picked up a faded document from a table. His hands trembled as he read it. "Project Lazarus," he whispered. "Classified experiment on reanimation." Emily gasped. They knew this was going to happen. Ethan kept reading, his face pale. They were experimenting on people, trying to bring the dead back to life. He turned the page. His eyes widened. And they succeeded. A heavy silence filled the room. Jake tightened his grip on the candlestick. "Then that means, this place was ground zero." Mia's face darkened. "And we're trapped inside it." The horror had only just begun. The underground chamber was eerily silent except for the soft flickering of torches and the hushed breathing of the terrified students. The old crates, rusted weapons, and medical equipment painted a chilling picture. This place had once been a secret laboratory. And now, it was their only hope for survival. Jake took the documents from Ethan and skimmed through them. The words blurred together in the dim light, but one sentence stood out. Subject exhibited increased aggression upon reanimation. No known cure. Immediate termination recommended. Jake swallowed hard and turned to the others. They knew exactly what they were creating. Emily clutched her arms, shivering. "We have to get out of here. There has to be an exit." Lucas grabbed one of the rusted swords from the pile. "And what if there isn't?" Ethan kept flipping through the papers. "There's another way out," he muttered, pointing at a rough sketch of the castle's underground tunnels. "A secondary passage leads outside the castle walls. If we can find it." Mia's eyes lit up with hope. "Then we can escape." Jake nodded. "Then let's move before those things find us." The awakening. As the group turned toward the tunnel entrance, a deep, wet gurgle echoed through the chamber. Everyone froze. The sound didn't come from behind them. It came from inside the room. Emily pointed with a trembling hand. "Al, look." In the shadows, one of the large metal storage containers sat slightly ajar. A pale, lifeless hand dangled over the side. Then, it twitched. The students took a step back as the hand moved, fingers curling unnaturally. A sickening crunch echoed through the chamber as something inside the container sat up. The lid clattered to the floor. A man, or what used to be a man, slowly rose. His skin was gray, his face gaunt, with hollow black eyes that gleamed in the torchlight. His chest was riddled with deep, stitched-up incisions. Dried blood caked his torn uniform. And then he growled. Before anyone could react, the thing leaped from the container with terrifying speed. Lucas swung his sword instinctively. The blade sliced into the creature's arm, but it barely flinched. Instead, it turned its head sharply toward Lucas, a guttural snarl escaping its lips. Then it attacked. Lucas barely dodged in time, stumbling backward as the monster lunged at him. Jake grabbed a rusted axe from the pile and swung with all his strength. The weapon connected with the creature's shoulder, making it stagger. But instead of falling, it just turned its head, its empty black eyes locking onto Jake. Emily screamed as another metal container in the room rattled. "There's more!" Mia cried. Ethan grabbed a torch from the wall and threw it at the first creature. The flames licked at its tattered clothing, and it let out a guttural howl. "Run!" Jake shouted. The students sprinted toward the passageway at the far end of the chamber. Lucas and Jake slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind them, breathing hard. Bang! The creatures slammed against the door from the other side. "We have to keep moving," Mia panted. "That door won't hold forever." The underground maze. The passage was long and narrow, the air thick with the scent of mold and decay. The walls dripped with moisture, and the torches lining the stone corridor flickered weakly. Ethan led the way, following the rough map he had found. "If we keep going straight, we should reach an old service tunnel that leads outside." Jake kept his grip on the axe, his knuckles white. Let's hope nothing else is waiting for us. As they walked, the tunnel sloped downward, leading them deeper beneath the castle. The air grew colder, and an uneasy feeling settled over the group. Then, Lucas whispered, "Do you hear that?" Everyone stopped. A faint, distant clicking sound echoed through the passage. Slow, rhythmic. Like nails tapping against stone. "What is that?" Emily whispered. Ethan checked the map again, his face turning pale. "We're not alone down here." Then, the clicking grew closer. Jake tightened his grip on the axe. "We need to move. Now." The students picked up their pace, hurrying through the dark tunnels. But the clicking grew louder, faster. And then, a figure dropped from the ceiling. It landed in a crouch, its limbs unnaturally long, its fingers tipped with sharp, claw-like nails. Its face was twisted in a permanent snarl, and its glowing red eyes locked onto them. Then it screeched. The sound was deafening, echoing through the tunnels. Then, from behind them, more screeches. Mia turned in horror. "There's more of them." The creatures emerged from the darkness, crawling along the walls, their twisted bodies moving like insects. "Run!" Jake shouted. The students bolted down the tunnel as the creatures charged. Ethan pointed ahead. "There!" The service tunnel. A rusty, half-broken metal door stood at the end of the passage. The students sprinted toward it, but one of the creatures leaped, tackling Lucas to the ground. "Lucas!" Mia screamed. Jake turned back, swinging his axe. The blade connected with the creature's head, splitting it open with a sickening crunch. Lucas scrambled to his feet, blood splattered across his face. "Move!" Jake and Lucas ran toward the door as Mia and Emily pushed it open. The group rushed inside, slamming it shut just as the creatures reached them. Bang! The creatures slammed against the door, shrieking in frustration. Everyone stood in silence, their breaths ragged. Then, Ethan shined his flashlight ahead. The tunnel stretched forward, leading into the dense forest outside. For the first time, hope flickered in their eyes. They had made it out of the castle. But the nightmare was far from over. The cold night air hit them like a slap as the students stepped out of the underground tunnel. The dense forest stretched before them, cloaked in darkness, the trees swaying eerily in the wind. For the first time in hours, they were outside. Emily collapsed onto the damp grass, her breath coming in short gasps. We actually made it." Mia leaned against a tree, pressing a hand against her chest. "But what now? We're still stranded in the middle of nowhere." Ethan checked his phone, no signal. "We need to find a road. There has to be a way out." Lucas wiped the blood off his face. "And what about those things? They might still be following us." Jake nodded grimly. "Then we don't stop moving. Something is watching." The group pressed on, moving deeper into the woods. The ground was uneven, covered in thick undergrowth, making every step feel like a struggle. The wind howled through the trees, carrying an eerie whisper that made their skin crawl. Snap! A branch broke somewhere to their left. Everyone froze. Emily grabbed Jake's arm. "Was that one of us?" The group exchanged nervous glances. No one had moved. Then, a slow, guttural breathing sound echoed from the darkness. Ethan pointed his flashlight toward the sound. The beam cut through the trees, but nothing was there. Just the endless stretch of the forest. "We need to move," Jake whispered. They picked up the pace, but the feeling of being watched never faded. Mia clutched her arms. "This place feels wrong." Lucas frowned. "It's just a forest." Then they heard it. A deep, wet sniffing sound. It was close. The first attack. Before anyone could react, something lunged from the shadows. A dark figure tackled Lucas to the ground. His scream was cut short as he struggled against the weight pressing down on him. "Lucas!" Mia screamed. Jake swung his axe, but the creature moved impossibly fast, darting backward into the trees. The flashlight caught a glimpse of it, a grotesque, twisted figure, its limbs too long, its mouth stretched into a permanent snarl. Lucas scrambled to his feet, panting. What the hell was that? Ethan's voice shook. That wasn't like the others. More rustling surrounded them. The bushes trembled as shadows moved between the trees. Emily gripped Jake's arm. They're all around us. Jake's grip tightened on his weapon. Then we fight. The first creature charged. Jake swung the axe, but the creature ducked, slamming into him. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. Lucas grabbed his rusted sword and slashed wildly, forcing the creature back. It snarled, its glowing red eyes locked onto him. Then, from the trees, 2 more figures emerged. Emily let out a sob. We're surrounded. Mia grabbed a broken branch and held it like a weapon. We have to do something. Ethan suddenly yelled, over here. Everyone turned just as Ethan struck his flashlight against a low-hanging branch, breaking it. The sparks ignited the dry leaves below. Fire. The flames spread rapidly, casting long, flickering shadows. The creatures hesitated, their movements twitchy, their eyes darting toward the growing fire. Jake coughed, pulling himself up. It's working. They're afraid of fire. The creatures let out unnatural screeches and backed away. Run! Mia shouted. The group sprinted through the burning undergrowth, not daring to look back. A new horror. After what felt like an eternity, they finally stumbled into a clearing. A dirt path stretched ahead, disappearing into the darkness. Lucas bent over, gasping. Did we lose them? Ethan turned, shining his flashlight back toward the forest. I think so. Then Emily let out a strangled gasp. Guys, look. The flashlight beam illuminated something in the distance, a large wooden sign, half buried under leaves. Ethan brushed off the dirt. The words, though faded, were clear. Facility perimeter. Do not enter. Lucas shook his head. No, we were supposed to be leaving the experiment site. Mia took a step back. Then why does it feel like we just walked into something worse? Jake exhaled slowly, gripping his axe. Because we probably did. From somewhere in the distance, a mechanical voice crackled to life over an unseen speaker. Subjects detected. Initiating containment protocol. A loud alarm blared. Then the sound of something massive moving in the darkness. The blaring alarm echoed through the dark forest, sending a chill down the students' spines. The ground vibrated beneath their feet, and the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery whirred to life in the distance. Emily grabbed Jake's arm, panic rising in her voice. What does containment protocol mean? Ethan's face paled as he looked at the facility sign. It means we were never meant to leave. Before anyone could react, floodlights blazed to life, cutting through the darkness like blades. The eerie glow revealed towering metal walls surrounding the facility ahead, their surfaces lined with barbed wire and automated turrets. A distant metallic click echoed, a weapon system arming itself. Then the ground shook. A deep, mechanical thud-thud-thud approached, accompanied by a heavy exhale, like a machine breathing. Jake turned toward the sound, gripping his axe. Something's coming. The unseen predator. The trees trembled as something massive moved just beyond the light's reach. The students barely had time to react before a hulking figure stepped into view. It was nearly 7 feet tall, its body covered in a strange blend of decayed flesh and mechanical plating. Wires snaked from its back like tendrils, and its glowing red eyes scanned the area with an eerie, calculated precision. Then, a deep robotic voice rumbled from its chest. Target acquisition, initiated. Lucas staggered back. What the hell is that? Before anyone could move, the creature charged. It moved impossibly fast for its size. Jake barely managed to roll aside as a massive metal claw slammed into the ground where he had been standing. The impact sent dirt and debris flying. Ethan pulled Mia away just in time as the creature's other arm lashed out, slamming into a tree and splintering it like paper. Jake scrambled to his feet, raising his axe. It's not just a zombie. It's something else. Emily's voice trembled. A weapon. The monster turned its head toward her, as if responding to her words. Then it lunged. A desperate escape. Lucas grabbed his sword and slashed at the creature's arm. Sparks flew as the rusted blade clashed against metal plating. The monster barely flinched. Ethan pulled a flare from his backpack, the last one he had. He flicked it on and tossed it at the creature's feet. The moment the red flames burst to life, the monster recoiled. It doesn't like fire. Ethan shouted. Jake didn't hesitate. Then let's burn it. Mia grabbed a broken branch and held it over the flare until the tip caught fire. She swung it at the creature, forcing it to step back. For a moment, it hesitated. Then, without warning, the mechanical voice rumbled. Recalibrating, adapting. And it stopped retreating. Mia's stomach dropped. Oh no! The creature slammed its claw into the ground, snuffing out the flare instantly. Then it lunged again. Jake barely dodged as the monster's arm swung toward him. The group scattered, running toward the facility entrance, hoping to find shelter. The massive metal gate loomed ahead, slightly ajar. It was their only chance. Inside. Now! Jake yelled. Lucas and Emily darted through the opening first, followed by Mia and Ethan. Jake ran last, slamming the gate shut just as the creature reached them. The monster roared in frustration, slamming its claw against the steel door, leaving a deep dent. For now, they were safe. Or so they thought. The facility's dark secret. The interior of the facility was dimly lit, the walls lined with blinking monitors and control panels. Thick cables ran across the floors, humming with electricity. The air smelled of chemicals and decay. Emily hugged herself. Where are we? Ethan walked toward one of the control panels, dusting off the screen. A security camera feed flickered to life, showing different sections of the facility, hallways, laboratories, and containment cells. Inside one of the cells, something moved. Mia pointed at the screen. Are those people? Lucas squinted. No. The figures inside the cells weren't human anymore. Their bodies were restrained by thick metal cuffs, their mouths muzzled. Their veins glowed faintly under the dim lights. Their eyes were empty. Jake clenched his fists. They were experimenting on them. Suddenly, the intercom crackled. A distorted voice filled the room. Welcome, survivors. You are now part of the experiment. The door behind them slammed shut. Lights flashed red. A countdown began on the screen. Containment breach in 60 seconds. Then, from the hallways beyond, the sound of footsteps. Many, many footsteps. And they were getting closer. The cold red glow of the countdown timer pulsed across the walls, bathing the students in an eerie light. Containment breach in 45 seconds. Ethan frantically pressed buttons on the control panel, trying to override the system. I can't stop it. The facility is locked down. Jake gritted his teeth. Then we need to find another way out. Lucas pointed toward a reinforced door on the other side of the room. That has to lead somewhere. Mia hesitated. But what about whatever's in those cells? Emily turned back to the screen. The figures in the containment cells had begun thrashing violently, their restraints barely holding them back. Their veins pulsed with a sickly green glow, and their jaws snapped open and shut like starving animals. Then the intercom crackled again. Subjects released. Initiating pursuit. A hissing sound filled the air. The locks on the containment cells clicked open. Run or die. The students didn't wait. Move! Jake shouted, yanking the door open. They sprinted down the dimly lit corridor as the containment doors behind them swung open with a deafening clang. Then came the sound of running. Fast. Too fast. Emily stole a glance over her shoulder and nearly tripped. The creatures had been human once. But whatever the experiment had done to them had turned them into something far worse. Their limbs were elongated, their mouths stretched open in a grotesque snarl. Their eyes burned with an unnatural glow. And they were gaining. Ethan cursed. "They're faster than the others." Lucas shoved a nearby cart into the hallway behind them, hoping to slow them down. It barely made a difference. The creatures leaped over the obstacle like it was nothing. The students burst through another door and slammed it shut behind them, locking it. The creatures screeched in rage and began pounding on the metal. Dents formed with every strike. Jake exhaled sharply. That won't hold them for long. A new threat. The students turned to survey the room they had entered. It was a lab. Glass tubes lined the walls, filled with a thick green liquid. Floating inside were bodies. Some looked human. Others were twisted, their forms misshapen, their faces frozen in silent screams. Mia covered her mouth. What kind of nightmare is this? Emily's hands trembled as she picked up a clipboard from a nearby desk. Her eyes scanned the notes. Project, Revenant. Objective, enhancement and control. Results, subjects show increased strength, speed, and aggression. Cognitive function is deteriorating. Ethan pulled open a file cabinet, his eyes widening. This wasn't just some outbreak. This was planned. Lucas backed away from one of the tubes. They weren't just making zombies. They were trying to create weapons. Suddenly, a metallic whirring sound filled the room. Jake turned toward the source of the noise. A massive storage unit labeled Prototype Unit 09 was unlocking. The doors slid open with a slow, mechanical hiss. Inside, something stirred. A massive humanoid figure stepped forward, its body covered in mechanical plating. Its face was half human, half machine, and its glowing red eyes locked onto them. Then the intercom crackled again. Prototype activated. Objective, terminate intruders. The last stand. The mechanical creature stepped forward, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. It raised its right arm, a massive, clawed appendage that whirred with hidden machinery. Jake gripped his axe tighter. This just keeps getting worse. Lucas gritted his teeth. We have to fight, don't we? Ethan's hands trembled. Do we even stand a chance? Mia's voice was steady. We don't have a choice. The monster lunged. Jake dodged just in time as its massive claw slammed into the floor, cracking the concrete. Sparks flew as it swiped at Lucas, barely missing. Emily grabbed a metal rod from the table and swung it at the monster's back. The impact barely did anything. The creature didn't even flinch. Then it turned toward her. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Emily, and a deep robotic voice rumbled from its chest. Target acquired. Emily's heart stopped. The monster swung. But at the last second, Mia shoved Emily out of the way. The claw slashed through the air. It impaled Mia through the stomach. Time seemed to freeze. Mia's eyes widened in shock. She gasped, blood trickling from her lips. The others screamed as the monster lifted her off the ground, its claws still buried in her torso. Emily reached out. No! Jake's vision turned red. You bastard! With a roar, he charged at the creature, swinging his axe with all his strength. The blade embedded itself into the monster's side, sending sparks flying. The creature staggered. Ethan grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and smashed it against the creature's head. The canister exploded, sending a burst of foam and gas into the air, momentarily disorienting it. Lucas yanked Mia free from the monster's claws. She collapsed into his arms, coughing weakly. Jake pulled his axe free. We have to get out of here, now. The monster shook off the attack and turned toward them again. Then, boom! The lab exploded. The final escape. The students were blown off their feet as the fireball consumed the room. The explosion sent debris flying, shattering the glass tubes and igniting the chemical vats. Somehow, they managed to scramble toward a side door, dragging Mia with them. They burst into a new hallway, one that led to a massive underground elevator. Ethan hit the control panel. "Please work, please work." The doors slid open. They rushed inside just as the fire spread behind them. The entire facility was collapsing. Jake slammed the button for the surface. "Come on, come on." The doors shut. The elevator lurched upward. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from below, the sound of the monster's roar echoed through the burning facility. But they were almost free. Mia groaned weakly. Emily gripped her hand tightly. "Stay with us. We're almost there." Lucas exhaled shakily. "Please, let this be the end." Then, the elevator stopped. And the doors opened. The elevator doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit corridor. The students hesitated, their bodies tense from exhaustion and fear. Behind them, the sounds of the collapsing facility rumbled, sending tremors through the floor. Jake tightened his grip on his axe. "Let's move. We don't know how much time we have." Lucas supported Mia, who was barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Blood soaked her shirt, and Emily pressed down on the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Ethan scanned the hallway. "There's a stairwell at the end. If we can get to the surface, we might have a chance." They stepped forward cautiously, each footstep echoing through the sterile, metallic walls. Then they heard it. A deep, metallic thud. Then another. Jake's stomach twisted. No way. The monstrous, cybernetic zombie, the prototype Unit 09, had survived. And it was coming for them. A race against death. The students ran. The hallways blurred as they sprinted toward the stairwell. Behind them, the beast's heavy footsteps quickened. The walls trembled as it picked up speed, its monstrous frame crashing through debris like it was nothing. Lucas kicked the stairwell door open, and they scrambled inside. He slammed it shut behind them and locked it. Boom! The entire doorframe dented inward as the monster slammed into it. Emily screamed, gripping Mia tighter. Ethan didn't wait to see if the door would hold, he was already hauling himself up the stairs. "Go!" Jake carried Mia as they raced up the stairwell, floor after floor. Every muscle burned, their lungs screamed for air, but they couldn't stop. Because it wouldn't stop. Boom! The door below was blasted off its hinges. The monster charged up the stairs after them, climbing with terrifying speed. Lucas looked down and swore. "It's gaining on us." Jake's mind raced. They were running out of time. Then he spotted a gas line running along the stairwell wall. His grip tightened on his axe. "Keep going," he panted. "I have an idea. The ultimate sacrifice." Emily turned. "What are you talking about?" "We have to." Jake shoved her forward. "Go!" She hesitated, then Ethan grabbed her arm and pulled her up the final steps. Jake stopped running. Instead, he raised his axe and swung it with all his strength. Crack! The axe blade sliced through the gas pipe. A loud hiss filled the stairwell as a thick cloud of gas spewed into the air. Jake stumbled back, coughing, as the monster lunged toward him. And then he flicked open a lighter. The tiny flame danced between his fingers. The monster paused, as if it understood what was about to happen. Jake smirked. "Burn in hell, you bastard." And he dropped the lighter. Boom! Escape. But not victory. The explosion tore through the stairwell like a thunderclap. Fire and debris erupted from below, swallowing everything in its path. The shockwave sent Emily, Lucas, Ethan, and Mia flying through the final door, out onto the surface. They tumbled across the dirt, coughing and gasping for breath. The entire underground facility collapsed behind them, sending a towering plume of smoke and fire into the night sky. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Emily's eyes widened. Jake! She turned toward the destruction, scanning the rubble for any sign of him. He was nowhere. Tears blurred her vision. No, no, no! Lucas clenched his fists, his whole body shaking. Ethan fell to his knees. He didn't make it. A heavy silence settled over them. Then, Mia groaned weakly. Look! They followed her gaze. In the distance, beyond the wreckage, a military convoy was approaching. Tanks. Helicopters. Soldiers in biohazard suits. A voice echoed through a loudspeaker. This is the Omega Containment Force. Remain where you are. Do not resist. The students exchanged nervous glances. They had escaped the zombies. But had they really survived? The end. Or is it?